Hey everybody, how are you doing on this wonderful Sunday afternoon, or at least Sunday afternoon in my time zone? I'm Sean Colleen, happy to be here with you all to talk about a project that I just released that hopefully will help some of you in your journeys to create new blogs or content. So I want to talk a little bit about it today. So the project we're going to talk about is called the BlogInABox project. And you can find the project at github.com/accellolabs/bloginabox. This project is based on some of the work I had done with my own blog and creating that and setting it up. And I wanted to have sort of a batteries included way for other folks to get started, because I know there's a lot of great ideas out there, and sometimes folks don't know, how can I get started, or how can I do this in a relatively painless way. And of course, there are sites like WordPress, right, or Blogger or things, but some folks really want a self-hosted solution. So what we're going to talk about is sort of how do we get a solution that can live within GitHub that is entirely free, that can be easily customizable, and that we can use in a variety of different ways. And so that's what we're going to walk through today. And we're going to do a quick tour of the tool and the where it lives. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and we're going to fork that repository as if you are a user of the tool. And we're going to go through how to set up a blog and a .com site with that tool. All right, sound good? So with that, let's go. Oh, and always, as always, feel free to drop comments in the chat. Happy to answer questions or anything along those lines. I think if you're watching this on Twitter, that may not be an option. But if you're watching it on either Twitch or YouTube, you should be able to drop a comment in there and I'll see it right away. And I'll try to keep, and I'll set up my phone right here, actually. And if anybody's tweeting at me, I should hopefully see that come through as well. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at what we're doing here. One moment, I'm going to go ahead and bring my screen in if that works. All right, and here we are. Okay, so what we've got, we'll first turn off my email notifications for a little while. So what we've got here is the BlogInABox repository here at GitHub. Again, github.com/accellolabs/bloginabox. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about how to navigate this repository, what's a part of it, and then we're going to go ahead and use it to get started. So let's go ahead and quick look at the README. So what we have, and I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit there. So what we have here is the introduction, offers a little bit of encouragement right up the front, because it is important to get your voice out there, and we certainly could use more voices out there. And so this hopes to help us with that. The second thing that I hope is important for everyone as well is if you need help or you're trying to accomplish something and you're using this tool, drop us an issue in the repository. I'm happy to help you with it. It's only going to make the product better. So if you're kind of taking the leap yourself and looking to use this tool to create your site or blog, don't hesitate to reach out in the GitHub issues there, and we'll be happy to help you. Next, after that, we've got some topics. Now, these topics are actually also published in our demo site. You'll see that they're a part of the repository in a minute, but we also publish them at a demo site, which is going to be, and I'll take this banner off. The demo site is bloginaboxdemo.com. Bloginaboxdemo.com. I'll navigate there briefly. Bloginaboxdemo. You can see here now it's a pretty sparse demo site in our case, right? But there are a bunch of posts that should walk through how to use this site to get started. And of course, this site itself is built using the BlogInABox tool. So we'll see how all that fits together in a little while. All right, we've got some Q&A there that won't quite matter to us right now, so we're going to go ahead and dive in and get started. So let's take a quick tour of what we've got in the repository here. And in fact, you know what? I'm realizing that we're going to fork it anyway, so we'll fork it as if we're going to use this tool, and then we'll go to jump into what's included. So when I say fork, for those of you, one of the things we want to be conscious of is that if you're looking to deploy a site or a blog for the first time, you may not be someone who writes code on a regular basis, or indeed even someone who interacts with GitHub or Git on a regular basis. And so what I'm going to try to do during this tutorial is not overlook or jump over some of those steps. I'm going to try really hard to call out things that might feel like muscle memory to me, but that users may be unfamiliar with. So certainly, if this tutorial doesn't help with that, feel free to follow up and ask a question or drop an issue here, and I will be happy to address that. We can certainly do follow-up tutorials as well. By the way, when I say issues, what I mean here is that GitHub offers an issues for repositories here. And you can think of that as a place where you may want to drop a question or a problem that you're having. You can click New Issue here if you've got a GitHub account. You can go ahead and add a title of that. We also have discussions here. If you feel free to use those if you prefer. We have the idea, you can drop ideas or Q&A or show and tell if you're using the project, but feel free to start a discussion or drop an issue however you want. We can always convert one to the other if we need to. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and think about forking a project. So what do I mean when I say forking a project? Well, in GitHub terms, what that means is, and I'll try to simplify as much as I can. In GitHub terms, what that means is you want to create a copy of the repository under your account, right? The repository under your account is where you're going to be able to make changes, and it'll be sort of linked to this repository, and this repository will serve as sort of the upstream repository. And that way you'll make changes against the one that lives in your account, but if I make changes here, you'll be able to pull them into yours as well. So let's go ahead and first, we're going to create a demo domain name here. We're going to create a blog that lives in a certain spot. And so I'm going to use a domain that I have called technicaljourneys.com that I haven't done anything with yet and probably should, but for now we'll use it for the purposes of this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and hit fork, and it says, okay, so where should we fork this? Now in this case, I have a few organizations that I'm a part of. We're going to select my own personal account here. And we're going to go ahead and you see now it's forking that. So it's creating a copy in my account, Sean Colleen /BlogInABox, that originated from the Excel Labs BlogInABox. So this Sean Colleen /BlogInABox, that's where we're going to do most of our updates for our personal site. So in this case, what we're going to do is go ahead, and first thing I want to do is I want to rename this, because BlogInABox isn't really going to be the title of my site, right? My site is going to be called technicaljourneys.com. So let's go ahead and rename this repository. Under settings here, you can see repository name, BlogInABox. I'm going to rename that to technicaljourneys.com. That's where we're going to, I think that's the name of the site here, technicaljourneys.com. Yep. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click rename on that. And now we see Sean Colleen /technicaljourneys.com forked from Excel Labs BlogInABox. So that's looking like what I want it to be so far. So the next step is, okay, this has some stuff in it that we're going to use and modify. So how do I access this and remove it and modify it? So there are a few ways that we can do that. With BlogInABox, what we did is we created what's called a dev container. Now, BlogInABox, the code that it uses runs on Ruby. It's a Jekyll blog. So if you were going to say start from scratch, you would have to install Ruby. You would have to install Node.js for the Node packages. That's a lot of extra stuff. And on some operating systems, some of those things can be a little tricky to get up and running. And so what we did instead is we opted to go the route of what's called a dev container. Now, instead of installing Ruby or Node.js, what you'll have to install first is Docker. And you can get Docker from, in fact, I'll search for Docker for Windows in my case. So you can get Docker Desktop, right? And so Docker Desktop, there are all sorts of guides on how to install it. If you look for download and install here at docker.com, it'll show you how to get Docker for Linux or Docker Desktop for Mac or Docker Desktop for Windows. So I've already installed that. One of the things that lets us do is, rather than having to, without going too deep into containers and Docker, one of the things that lets us do is create a container image that has all the Ruby dependencies installed, that has all of the Node.js and its dependencies installed, that has everything that you need to get up and running for developing something out of the box. And there are two ways to open a dev container. One way, and in fact, in one way, you don't even need Docker for Windows. The first way is that we could open this repository in VS Code. So if you have VS Code installed, you can go to the code button here, and under local, you could say open with GitHub Desktop or open with VS Code, and that would allow things to open up. Now, one of the things that we're going to do is, let's assume you don't have Docker installed. You don't have VS Code installed. You're kind of like, all right, that's great, but I don't really want to go through all of that, or I can't install Docker for Windows or something like that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to open this up in something called GitHub Codespaces. Now, if you have access to GitHub Codespaces, under this code button, you'll see the Codespaces tab. And the cool thing about Codespaces is it's still mind-blowing for me, honestly, and we'll see this in a minute. With Codespaces, you can actually, under this button, create new code space. And when you click new code space, it's actually going to open that dev container in the cloud on GitHub and connect you to it in the browser, which is amazing. So you can do all of your editing on this entire site from a browser window, which I think is really pretty nifty. So let's go ahead, just for the purposes of this discussion, and go ahead and open it in a GitHub code space. And this is going to hold me to whether this works, because I actually haven't tried this yet. So we're going to see how that turns out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click new code space. What you'll see here is GitHub is going ahead and building the dev container. We can look at all of the contents of the dev container momentarily, but it's building the dev container, and it's going to go ahead and pull that down. I'll go ahead and view the logs just so you can see what's happening. Right now, GitHub is pulling all of the layers of that container and downloading them and setting up what we need to get our environment running. We can see here we've got some tools that we're adding. We've got some things that we're adding. This is all part of the dev container contents that we created. But for now, you as a user don't need to so much worry about this. So you'll see shortly, we can see the container is built. Now the code space is being configured, and shortly what we're going to see is a VS Code window. And that VS Code window is going to contain, oh, there it is. The VS Code window is going to contain the files in our solution, right on the left-hand side. We've got a terminal window here that we can work with. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can zoom in a little bit, and I can. Thank you, GitHub Codespaces. So we've got a terminal window here where we can type commands. We've got our files that we can access on the left-hand side here. And one of the cool things you'll see is there even is a list of extensions here. And we actually have, oops, the extensions are loading. We actually have in our code spaces some extensions that are installed, which is pretty neat. And what we've been able to do is actually recommend some extensions for you out of the box and have those installed and ready to go when you utilize GitHub Codespaces, which I think is pretty lovely. Okay, so let's assume, right, we're on technicaljourneys.com. We've forked the contents of BlogInABox, and so let's go on a little bit of a tour and see what BlogInABox offers. Now, actually, one of the things I'm excited about, let me see actually here if I can move my face over to another side of the screen here. I can't. Okay, so at the bottom of the VS Code window, in fact, I'll move this. Hold on one moment here. I'll move VS Code over. One of the things you can see here is that we've got a code tour window. One of the things that we're using as part of this repository is something called Code Tour, which is an extension for VS Code. So what we can do actually, we've got Code Tour here, and you can get a tour of the kind of things that we're using and why we're using them. So one of the things that we're using here is the Jekyll blog tour. So we can click on this. All right. And here, what you can see is that we see a code tour window open. We can see step 1 of 15, the Jekyll blog tour. I'm not sure why GitHub Codespaces is telling me it can't. Okay. Let's go ahead and understand why clipboard access is denied. I've definitely given access. I'm not going to worry about that for now. Okay, we'll let that keep popping up in the background. That's okay. If someone from the GitHub Codespaces team is watching this, that might be something you wanna look at. But anyway, we have our code tour here. And one of the things this is going to do, which I love about this extension, is it's going to take us on a guided tour of our repository. And so it's going to go through all the files, and I've added this content here. You can actually step through all of the setup that we have, and I try to explain some of the things that will matter. So in this case, you can see BlogInABox uses Jekyll and the minimal mistakes theme. And so here we'll call out some of the aspects of how the blog is currently set up. So let's go, and this is the config Yml file, which is used to specify some of the settings for Jekyll and our theme. So we can see it's using the remote theme, which is using the fantastic minimal mistakes theme. which it comes from a really, in fact, let me just call that out real quick. Let's look at the website there for that, github.com/nmistakes. I believe the designer's name is Michael Rose, I believe. Yep, Michael Rose. He created this phenomenal theme for Jekyll called Minimal Mistakes. I've been using it on my blog for years, and so this theme is used out of the box in our library here. Now you can see we're pegged to a specific version of Minimal Mistakes, so if we want to update it, we'll have to do that explicitly here, and that's because as new editions of the theme are released, we don't want it to all of a sudden mess up your site or something like that, and so we copy it to an exact version at a point in time. There's a blog post on how to update that theme. We start off by not publishing future posts, and that means that you can actually add posts that are future dated, and our scheduling tool, which I'll show you in a little while, will go ahead and connect to that, and then you can actually schedule posts for the future. But we don't want posts with a future date to be published by default, because obviously you're trying to publish them in the future. So we set that to false. And there are a number of settings here for locale and title, and we're going to go through and edit all of these, so I'm going through this tour a little speedy. But what I want you to know is that we do have these tour steps here for along the way, and we talk through all of the items. But since we're going to go ahead and look at all of that, I'm going to go ahead and think about it from a user's perspective and say, okay, I want to get my blog up and running. How do I do that? So let's go ahead and look through the BlogInABox demo posts. I'll go down here, opening the project for development. Okay, we've opened it in code spaces, in GitHub code spaces. Pretty great. How do we get started? Okay, so here's some guidelines for getting started. And I'm going to try and follow these directions so that I'm kind of, we call that dog fooding sometimes. So I'm kind of, eating my own dog food, so to speak, and making sure that these directions are indeed followable. Delete your CNAME file. That one belongs to us, so you'll have a conflict if you try to publish. So let's go see what that's talking about. Now this is on the tour as well. We would have seen this, but there's this little CNAME file down here, and it still references the bloginaboxdemo.com. Now I'm not going to delete it in this case because I know we're going to try and move it to technicaljourneys.com. Right now, a couple of things here. So I just made my first change, but we have a couple options when we're using GitHub in terms of how we want that change to proceed. Really would love that box to stop popping up. Okay, so when we think about how to get that to proceed, what we want to do is we have a couple ways that we can do what's called committing our changes. So we can commit our changes to the main branch, which we're on now, and we can push those up to live in GitHub, or we can create what's called a branch, and that way we can sort of do our changes separately from the main part of our code, and then we can try to merge those changes back in via a pull request. So that's what I'm going to do in this case, just to go ahead and demo that. So there are a couple ways that we can create a branch, and so I'm going to do this in this case. You can click the bar down the bottom here of VS Code, which you can't really see because of my face, but there's a name there, or the name of the branch there, which is main. And if you click that, this window will pop up. And then we can click create new branch. And click new branch, and what are we going to call this? We'll call it first edits. Something like that. All right. Now we are in the first edits branch. Great. So what we're going to do is we see over here the left-hand side, GitHub source control has seen that we've made a change, right? So the change that we made here, if we double-click on this, we can see we removed BlogInABox demo, we added technicaljourneys.com. I can add a message for what we did. So in this case, updated CNAME to point to our domain. Right? That's a description of the change that we made. All right, I'm going to hit Control-Enter, but you could also hit the check mark here. And that's going to go ahead and commit that change on our branch. Now, in order to get it back up to GitHub, we have to actually publish this branch. But I don't want to just publish a branch. I want to create a pull request. So I'm again going to bring up, oh, it's funny, in VS Code, the command palette is Control-Shift-P. I don't actually know what the command palette is here. I wonder how I can do that. Anyway, in this case, that's okay. I have an extension over here called GitHub, and see that it has a section for pull requests. And so I could do this in the browser. I could do this, on github.com, but I can actually do it right from here with VS Code. So I have this button here for creating pull request. And you'll see here, I have the option to, well, perhaps in GitHub code spaces, it doesn't quite work how we would expect it to. So you know what? Since it looks like in code spaces, it might be having a little bit of a trouble here. Let's see. All right, so in this case, rather than doing that, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and publish this branch. Now, it looks like we have two spots where it asks us where we want to publish it. Now, in this case, we want to publish it to the origin, which is what our forked site is called. GitHub calls that forked site that you're pulling from the origin. Upstream is that upstream repository, which still lives at Excel Labs. So for our case, I want to publish this branch into this Sean Colleen repository. So I'm going to click that. And we can see now that those changes are going to be published into GitHub. I'll try and see if it lets me create a pull request here one more time. It does not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to GitHub here on the web, and I can go to, we see here, first edits had recent pushes less than a minute ago. Thank you, GitHub web interface. I can click here, compare and pull request. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say work in progress. And that's just a prefix that I tend to use when things are in progress. Typically that helps other devs on a team know not to merge something, because I would prefer to create a pull request earlier than later. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say first edits to make the site our own. Sure, why not? And we'll come down here and we'll say create pull request. All right, so now all the changes that we push are going to be captured as part of this pull request. We can see that updating the CNAME to point to our domain is the first one. We've also got some extra stuff that's happening here that I'll talk about in a little bit. In fact, we might as well talk to it now. Out of the box with GitHub, out of the box with this blog in the box, we have a couple things. We have Netlify is going to be installed. Now we can set that up on our own. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And we've got the idea of some of these GitHub actions. You can see here that we have some markdown linting, which is run successfully. We'll talk about that. We've got something called CodeTour Watch. We saw that CodeTour plugin. This action helps understand if that CodeTour would need to be updated, which is really handy. We have a GitHub action for spell checking and to make sure that the build of the site will work correctly. And then we've got some extra stuff down here for Netlify preview. Now this preview has been canceled because we haven't hooked it up yet, but we will do that shortly. So okay, back to our progress here. So update the name within your dev container.json file to match your blog's name. We're actually not going to do that because I probably should update that step. I'm going to make a note to myself here. In fact, I'm going to make a note in the issues on the project itself to remove that language. I used to think we wanted to do that, but we actually don't want to do that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create that issue and we'll track that later. All right, back to our project. We don't want to follow that step. Go through the configuration guide for the minimal mistakes theme and update the docs/config.yaml accordingly. So the minimal mistakes theme has an awesome ton of settings here. Now in our case, I happen to be familiar with a lot of these settings, so I'm going to go through the config YAML myself, but there's a number of themes as you can see. There's the site locale, we can do titles, and there's great descriptions and everything here on the minimal mistakes theme site itself. So don't worry so much, we're not going to go through every single one now, but that's to say this is a fantastic place to look when you're first getting started. So our instructions here say to update the config.yaml file. We see it here on the left. All right, and here, let's go through that config file as if we're making our technicaljourneys.com site. I like the default theme for minimal mistakes, so we're going to go ahead and leave that. The locale for us is still going to be English US by default. That's where I'm operating from. So let's go ahead and update the title, technicaljourneys.com. We'll make some kind of subtitle. A wonderful journey via technology. Name here, technicaljourneys.com. And then we'll have a description, a longer description for our site. The domain name and protocol is going to eventually live at technicaljourneys.com. And it's not going to live at /blog. It's going to have a base URL there. I'm going to go ahead and end this code tour. The repository now lives at Sean Colleen, and remember we changed the name from BlogInABox to technicaljourneys.com, so I'll update that. I'm not going to add any teasers or logos or anything now, just because I don't want to do that for this demo. But certainly if I was going through to set up, we might add some images and put them in the images folder and go from there. Words per minute is the default amount of words you're assuming someone on your site is reading, and Jekyll actually uses this, which is pretty cool, to calculate the number of minutes it thinks an article will take for someone to read. So you can kind of say this article is going to take 5 minutes, or it's going to take 10 minutes, etc. We also have a comments provider called Giscus, which is Git discussions. The theme comes with a number of options if you'd like to use them. Out of the box, we come configured with Giscus, and so we'll go ahead and set that up in a minute, and that'll help us folks be able to add comments, etc., to our site. So there's some default IDs here from Giscus, right? And we're gonna change those in a little bit. So we'll skip that for now. Out of the box, your site is going to have a feed that lives at feed.xml. This is great if you want folks to be able to subscribe to your blog or find anything like that. So pretty lovely there that you can get that support right out of the box. People can kind of subscribe to your updates and notify when you publish content. We don't need to update these settings yet, but we have the idea of we can verify our site with Google, etc., and enter the verification code here, and they'll show up. So social sharing for Twitter, we'll use my username for now. And then we can kind of do another thing we can do for the social sharing. We can say, is it a person or an organization, etc., and different links. We can do that. For now, I'm not going to worry about it. Similarly, with Google Analytics, we could set that to any of the Google Analytics platform tags here, and we could then set the tracking ID, etc., and have Google Analytics added to our site. You can also note for a lot of these options, you can do custom. So for example, I tend to use, right now I'm using Fathom Analytics for my site. So I could have custom, and then the theme, minimal mistakes theme, goes through the instructions of where I would need to put a file to override or do that custom stuff, which is really nice. It makes the theme very flexible. Now we get to the site author information, right? So I'll add my name here, right? So bio, just another dev in the world, right? We'll put something like that there. Location, I'm in Arlington, Virginia, so I'll put that there. We have the idea here of email. You can add your email here to add it to the author info. Why not? We'll do seanclean@gmail.com. And now we actually have a number of links that can show up alongside the author profile. And the cool thing is you can edit these pretty quickly too and give it its own icon. So in this case, there's an icon, and they use the font awesome icon specification. So if you go to, in fact, I'll show it here, fontawesome.com, there are a number of different icons that you can use. So you can click on icons up here, and you can get a big list of all the icons that you might want to use for different categories. And so you can reference those icons and they'll show up in the theme here. So for example, this is going to be an envelope, square envelope. This is going to be a link. This will look like the Twitter logo. This will look like the Facebook logo, for example. And so I'd update that here. Right, we'll add that. Website, in this case, right, I'll just to show you, we can reference that. I'll have my website there. We'll use my Twitter. I'm not going to add Facebook right now, and if you don't add the URL, it'll hide it. It won't show up. Right? So I don't have to delete this or anything. I can just comment that out. But for now, since we're not going to use it, I'll go ahead and delete it. GitHub.com, right? We'll have to update my GitHub there. And then Instagram, I'm not going to use that right now either. Right? So go ahead and save that. So let's go ahead and track some of the some of the changes we've made. Now we've made a bunch of changes, and then probably I would have wanted to make smaller changes and add smaller commits, but we'll just, for now, we'll go ahead and add a commit message of some changes. All right, we'll go ahead and save that. And then it says sync changes, and that's where you say, okay, those changes are in our code space, but we want to push them up to GitHub. Make sure those are on GitHub. All right, there we go. All right, so back to the file. Now we have the same thing in the footer that we can do here. All right, in my case, I want the same links in the footer that I do on my author profile. So we'll go ahead and add those and save it again. Okay. Those are the same links in the footer. All right. Next up, we've got a couple of options. This is probably something you won't need to worry about for right now. And so these are some of the file ignores, inclusions and exclusions that you may want to have, but we don't actually have to worry about those. We want to keep the files for Git and Subversion, but again, this is really not so much we have to worry about now. For Markdown extensions, this tells Jekyll what extensions are Markdown files, and here all of the common ones are listed. In our case, you'll note that we're going to be naming the files with .md, which is short for Markdown. That'll help us understand. That'll help us identify those for compilation. So, taking a break here for a second. I know I've been talking for a bit. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I haven't seen any pop up yet or on Twitter, but that's okay. If you've got them, send them my way, and we'll be happy to address them. So for the conversion here, the next step is we can see that the theme allows us to specify, or Jekyll allows us to specify which Markdown engine you're using. In our case, for GitHub Pages, we typically are going to use Cramdown. For the highlighter, there's also a tool that can highlight code snippets with the appropriate language that you have. So the highlighter in this case that we're using is called Rouge. And then for Markdown processing, for Cramdown's options, it asks us what kind of input we have. This GFM means GitHub flavored Markdown. So what that means is it's a typical format of writing Markdown, and you'll see some of that in a little bit. And I've got some references on how to write Markdown, etc., in one of the blog posts for getting started. So we don't have to worry about that for now. That's a specific kind of format of writing Markdown code. It's pretty standard, and since we're using GitHub anyway, for most of our hosting, it would make sense to just use GitHub flavored Markdown and go along with it there. All right. Similarly, now we have some outputtings. Every post that you make is going to have a permalink. So this is a way of getting back to that page, right, and making sure that there's a way to have a URL for a given post. Now, you can choose a lot of different formats for this. You can use a category name, you can do all kinds of things. By default, what we're saying is if you have a blog post that is written on today's date, which is April 3rd, 2022, that would be, the blog post would be at /year, so /2022, /4, / whatever the slug of the title is for your blog post. So we don't include the day, for example, in this URL title. So just wanted to point that out, but this is heavily customizable, and the Jekyll documentation goes into how you can choose that. So if you've got a different preference, by all means, go for it. Similarly, the number of posts to show. For the demo, we set this a little high because we wanted all of our posts to show. But in this case, I probably just want like the most 5 recent page, the 5 most recent posts to show. So I'm going to go ahead and say show 5 most recent posts. So that's the next thing we've made. Now we can see sync changes too, where we can push those up. I'll go ahead and push those up again. Now we get to the idea of plugins. There are some default plugins. You probably won't need to mess with this too much. This is for helping the theme and Jekyll compile for GitHub Pages. One of the plugins, for example, we're using is Gmoji, and that's going to allow us to use GitHub emojis. For example, like a +1. If I write that in a blog post, that will look like a thumbs up icon. So those are some ways to think about how we're doing that. Similarly, GitHub Pages here, we're whitelisting some plugins there. And now we've got some categories for our archives. So we have a different category archive called categories that will sort our posts by the categories that we assign to them, which is nice. You kind of get those category pages out of the box if you assign a category to a post. And then we have some defaults here. And what this is saying is that for all of the posts in our post directory, which we'll look at shortly, the layout for them is going to be called single. That's a layout that is provided by our theme, the minimal mistakes theme. We are going to also make it as though we've specified the author profile is true for that page, showing the read time is true, comments are true. So these things are on by default for any item in our posts directory. All right, so speaking of that, let's go and look at some of these posts and see how they're referenced here. In our posts directory here off to the left, we can see all of those blog posts that are on the demo, that are on the BlogInABox demo site. So I'm going to go ahead, for our sake, and I'm going to go ahead and delete all of those that aren't. And we'll just go ahead and delete them because those are all the demo posts. All right, and see that they've been deleted. I'll go ahead and say delete the demo posts. And again, because this is for our technicaljourneys.com site, we don't need those demo posts. I left the one post because we'll look at some of the elements of this here. So here, first up we have the dates, right? Your post is going to have a date here, and then you can have whatever the slug is that you'd like it to be. That's typically you want it to be lowercase. You want to put dashes in there, right? Typically no spaces, for example. But one of the things, so let's just do. We'll call it Hello World, and we'll make it today's date, which is April 3rd. All right, so now the URL for this post will be /2022/04 or /4, and then /hello-world. That's how we'll see this page. So let's go ahead and change the title for this post. And then again, we'll update the date here. This will tell us when it should be published. And we can publish the date, we can have the exact time, and we can specify a time zone offset as well. And we can also specify an excerpt. This is what will show up as the sort of preview of the blog post on our main page. So let's go ahead and add something there. So just a little hello from our site. All right. And so we can see here, there's already this will show a blue square information icon, this information source specification there. And that's a way of inserting an emoji in our posts. So let's go ahead, and now we're writing in something called Markdown. Well, sorry, before we start that, this information up here in Jekyll blogs is called the front matter. That's front matter is typically what that's called. And so what we had there is, for example, we saw for all the posts in our post directory, comments were true. That's the equivalent of saying comments true here in this front matter. This is something that the blog and the theme can reference, and that you can write things that reference as well. So if you have certain things about a post that you need to consider in the layout or in how you want to show something, you can do that. But just so you know, that's called a front matter. And so typically, right now, our theme, well, actually, let's go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and preview things here, because we haven't actually started anything up yet, and I've been a little overconfident perhaps. So we'll say rename and reset blog post. All right, so we've done that. We'll go ahead and push those changes. So let's go ahead and see how this might work. In fact, I'll just go here and I'll say some text, just so we've got a body to the blog post. Let's go over here to our terminal. And one of the things we haven't quite discussed yet, but one of the things we've done in our GitHub dev container here is we've added some shortcuts to make it easier for you. Now, in the demo blog site here, we can see there's an article called Running Commands. And that'll show you how to do some of this stuff here. But just for our sake, right, we'll go ahead and we'll run some commands here. All right. So the first command we'll do is we'll run the build command. What that's going to do, that alert really loves to keep popping up. What that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and, well, actually, it's not going to work. We're going to do a command called local dev. That's going to go ahead and install all of the packages that we need and get everything up and running for us. So we're going to allow it to do that. We have some warning icons over here from code spaces, which I think is, oh, some extensions want to make some changes. That's okay. We don't need to worry about that right now. I really would love this alert to stop. Okay. While we're waiting for that to run, let's see if I can learn a little bit more about this. Clipboard access denied. How do I allow VS Code? You're able to grant access from a clipboard from your browser through the settings for site permissions or by looking for that object. Okay. Let's see if I can allow cookie tracking content. Interesting. Well, I'm not certain why that is. Let's see, permissions, location, camera, microphone. Let me see if I can search for. Well, that's interesting. All right, so I'll have to look at that a little bit later. Anyway, what we've seen now, I'll scroll up to the top and we'll see what has actually happened. I ran the local dev command, and what that did, that's a shortcut that we've set up for you that goes through and installs all of the packages and builds the blog and then runs it. Now, one of the things we can see here is it says the blog is running at this port, 127.0.0.1. So that's the local machine. But this is a browser in GitHub. Like, how is that going to work, right? So GitHub Codespaces has this cool thing called ports. And one of the things it will do is it'll set up a little local address for you so that you can actually go to a link. And this blew my mind the first time I did it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this address here. Or maybe I can't. Let's see. There we go. And now we can see here, we saw a little auth window and it was getting started. It says connecting to the forwarded port. And here's our blog. It's running in another window. And that's just something that I love about GitHub Codespaces. Like, to me, that's so cool. I'm running a web server in a web browser window and I can look at it right here like as if it's nothing. And there's typically a lot of setup in something like that. And so it's really cool that's possible. So here we can actually see we have our hello world post. We have our hello world post. We can see a little hello from our site. We see our excerpt there. I can click on that and we see here some text. I mentioned that reading time, so we can see it's less than a 1 minute read. It calculated that. We've got the links there. Okay, so far so good, not too shabby. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll stop that server in the terminal there. And so now that site is stopped. We can do a couple other shortcuts. I'll run you through them real quick. Let me go ahead and hide that. So let's see here. We can run, for example, spell check. That's going to go through and it will go ahead and spell check all the posts. Now we can see this little squiggle here. Now there's an extension in VS Code that says, okay, Markdown files should end with a single new line character. So this is something called Markdown Link. It helps us write better Markdown. And so just to demonstrate one of our tools and how it might help us, I have this lint command excuse me, that will run Markdown lint. And we can see here, it actually shows an error. So files should end with a single new line character. So that's the same error we see above. So that's cool. Now we've got that sort of check that can run for us. And we have a GitHub action that runs that check to make sure that our files are properly formatted. But then I've got this here. And I can hit Control, and in VS Code you can hit Control period, or I could, I think, right-click on it, or click this light bulb here, and you can say fix this violation. And in this case, that's just adding another line to the document there. So we'll go ahead and say, sure, fix linting issue. And now if I run the lint command, you can see no output is received. It returns that it's totally good. So no errors found there. All right, so now I've got a post there. I've got, so it's in my branch. I've got this post. My spell check is good. My linting is good. So let's look at what else I might want to do here. Let's go into some of the other getting started items. Let's see. So we've gone through the config.yml file. We've gone through the posts in the post directory. Oh, we may want to replace the favicon file, right? Because it's the Excella logo here. And so when you've got a little icon file, you can create one of your own and drop it right in there. That'd be great. So you can also, if you say you don't want to set up comments right now, you could set Giscus to false, and that would just remove comments, right? It would turn off comments for the site so far. We're going to set that up momentarily, so we're not going to turn that off. All right, we did set the paginate setting to 5 or something less than 50, so we've done that. We have renamed the repository, and so we followed that as well. Okay, so far, so good. Let's go back to all of our posts here. We've talked about running commands, protecting your branch to ensure that build steps run. So let's go back to our pull request here. So this is our pull request. We can see, well, let me, have I pushed my changes? I did, good. We can see here, we have our changes that have added here, and we see there's some things that have failed. But we also want to make sure that these things succeed before we create the site here. So let's go ahead and let's look at our settings. So we don't want to just be able to merge a pull request if those checks fail, right? We want to make sure that things are in working order before we merge things back in. And so what we do here is we're going to go to this branches section. We see branch protection rules for our main branch, and so we can go ahead and edit that. And we can see we want to require a pull request, right? So we don't want to just merge things into that main branch. Now you may want to, in which case you can certainly uncheck this. I like to force myself to create pull requests just as a matter of habit. And so here we can also require certain status checks to pass before merging. Now in this case, actually, and I appreciate this, I thought this wouldn't come over when we forked our repository, but it actually did. So in order for you to merge, the following 3 actions are required. We have to be able to lint things, we have to be able to build things, and the spell checking has to be correct. Okay, not too shabby. So I was going to worry about a code tour plugin, but it looks like we don't have to have that passing before merging things. So this is a way of just making sure that those protection rules are in place. But kudos to GitHub for bringing those over for us. I thought I was going to have to talk through how to set those up. So hey, thanks GitHub. Now those checks have to pass before merging. So if we scroll up and we go back to our pull request here, we go in, we can see that the code tour is failing. We'll look at why in a second. But since the build, or since the linting, the spell checking, and the build items are passing, we can go ahead and merge this if we wanted to. If say we have a check that fails, or we want to look at it, we can click on details over here to the right, as I will for the code tour changes. Now you're going to get some output here that, depending on the tool you're using, may feel a little technical here. So let's look at what we've got going on. Okay. Resource not accessible by integration. It looks like we're still pulling some things here from the other items. That's fine. We'll have to work to set that up. And so basically this looks like it's not set up yet. That's totally fine. Okay. So let's go back and look at what we want. So our branches are protected by default, which is great. And now we're going to go to setting up comments using Giscus. So Giscus, oh, interesting. Looks like I may have meant to add some text here, but I didn't. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add an issue for our main repository just so I can fix that. All right. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'll add one more issue. And Markdown. Okay, I'll save that for future follow-up. Okay, so setting up comments using Giscus. So this blog post goes through a more formal walkthrough. So we're going to go to this app called giscus.app. This helps us set up some things here for adding a comment system that is powered by GitHub discussions. GitHub discussions, you may recall, are here in GitHub. Right, so I can go to discussions. In my item here, let's see, Sean Colleen's technical journeys. In my technical journeys here, I see I don't have discussions enabled. So I can do that by going to settings. And here, I can click on enabling discussions. right? So now discussions are enabled. And we see here, discussions have indeed popped up. So I can go ahead and start that. Now, the way this is going to work, in this walks through in the blog post, is I'm going to, under categories here, I'm going to add a new category. And we'll call that blog comments. Comments on the blog. We'll get a description. I'm going to make that announcement style. We don't want people to add their own discussions here. The Discuss app is going to keep track of those. I can give it a different icon if I want to here. Maybe we'll just say, if I want a pencil icon or something like that, right? I can have a pencil icon. So I'll go ahead and I will click Create to create that discussion category. And we can see here, I've done that. Now I've got everything in place I need to go back to Discuss. So the Discuss app here, it says, okay, it's a comment system powered by GitHub Discussions. All right, so first up, we have a language option. In my case, I'll choose English. Next, it says choose the repository Discuss will connect to. So in this case, it's going to be Sean Colleen / technicaljourneys.com. Now, it doesn't work right now because we can see the Discuss app has to be installed and the discussions feature has to be turned on. So what we actually can do here is we're going to go to this Discuss app and I'm going to click Configure. If you're using it for the first time, I think it says Set Up instead. I'm going to configure it for my Sean Colleen organization, confirm my password there, and it only applies right now to a few repositories. So I'm going to go ahead and search for the one that I just created, technicaljourneys.com. We'll go ahead and save that. All right, now I've got it enabled. Let's go ahead and see if I can. All right, now we see a green check, success. It meets all of the above criteria. This is great. And now there are a couple different ways that you could choose to do the certain to do the mapping for the discussions. So in this case, what we're going to do is we'll look at how it's set up by default here because I don't honestly remember. So I'm going to go into our configuration here and scroll up to find those discussion files here. Okay, it looks like we use path name here by default. So okay, I'll select path name. It doesn't really matter to me in this case. For discussion category, we're going to use blog comments as we've seen. All right. We can enable reactions. Okay, that sounds fun. We'll do that. We'll keep a light theme, but you can choose different themes here if you'd like for the discussions. And now there's a thing where it says, okay, enable Discuss by pasting this script into your website. In our example, we're actually just going to copy these IDs. We'll put those into our config YAML here. So the repo ID, you can see it's a little different than the one that we had originally. The category is going to be blog comments still, which we have the same from our default. The category ID, copy that. We're still going to use path name. We're still going to enable reactions. We're going to have the theme be light. All right, so we've updated our Discuss settings. We've enabled it. So there we go. We'll go ahead and sync those changes. So let's go ahead and see that in our local environment. I'm going to go ahead and run the serve command. And then again, that's in that blog post on running commands, right? The serve, that's the little shortcut that we created. So let's go ahead. We see ports again. That port is now running again. Let's go ahead and follow that link. All right, we see our test here. We see our recent posts. And now you'll notice it's not showing up. And hey, why is that not showing up, right? And I think it's because in our case, it needs to be in production mode. We need to make, and typically, right, we wouldn't want comments to be writing comments in our local environment. So I think at this point, if we were to publish this site at the domain name, we'd see the comments. And so you know what? Why not? Let's go ahead and publish this site and get it working, which is going to be one of our next steps here. So we have a blog post on this as well. I'm going to go ahead and close some of these extra windows up top. All right, so we have some of these blog posts up here. And let's go ahead and publish this to our domain name. So our CNAME file here specifies technicaljourneys.com. We're going to go ahead and merge in our changes in GitHub, and then we'll figure out how to deploy to that site. So first off, let's go to our pull requests. Hold on a second. Did I make that pull request to the wrong spot? I did make it to the wrong spot. No wonder. That was silly. I don't know how that happened. No wonder I was a little confused by what was going on there. Okay, so let's see if I can merge this to, well, isn't that silly? I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and figure out how to get this changed here. Well, silly me. I've been going this entire time making the edits against the wrong repository. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Let's go ahead and just going to go ahead and we'll redo everything real quick. I'm going to go ahead and click this just to copy the whole thing. So don't mind me. I'm going to keep that open just so I can copy it. But we have a couple of changes to make here. First off, we don't want to merge that in at all, right? Because that would be totally screwing up our repository. So instead, I'm going to go BlogInABox. Oops. Silly me. Let's go ahead and go to that pull request. Let's close that so that we don't accidentally deploy to the wrong thing. Now let's go to our actual Sean Killeen technical journeys. This is where we want to be. Let's go ahead and we have two branches here called first edits. Now let's go ahead and create a pull request here. We've got BlogInABox. We want to merge it into technical journeys, and we want to compare the first edits branch. Now we're going to make that pull request in the right spot. So it's still got all of our changes, which is lovely, right? So we're going to create that pull request. We'll add it again. So I was making the pull request against the wrong repository. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've still got all of those items here. We've still got all of those actions. Let's go ahead, go to those settings, branches. So we do have to add those branch protection rules. That makes more sense. So the branch name pattern is main. We will require a pull request. And we will require status checks to pass. Oh, and no status checks are found. Maybe perhaps we haven't run them yet. Let's go ahead and see. GitHub Actions. So one of the things we can see here, and this is good to add to our guidance as well, is when we fork a workflow, when we fork an item, workflows aren't run by default, which makes sense, right? Because we don't know necessarily what they're going to do. They come from somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and add that text. I'll make a note for myself to add that to our guidance. Guidance for enabling workflows. Okay, so I've made that note for ourselves. So we see here, we want to say, okay, I understand workflows. Go ahead and enable them. Right, so that now we've got great workflow there. Okay, so we see our pull request is there. Now those workflows will, I have to make a little push here to enable them. So what I'm going to do here is just, I'm going to make a blank commit, and this isn't something you have to worry about. Blank commit to force a build. And I'm going to just make an empty commit. So we'll say -- allow empty. That makes a commit that we'll see here that now I can sync a change, even though I didn't make any changes. So that should blank commit to force a build, and I'm thinking this should kick off the GitHub Actions. And there they go. So we just had to trick them into showing up a little bit. All right, so now that those actions are there, let's go to our settings and do that branch protection and make sure that they run. Branch protection rules for the main branch require a pull request, and we will require those status checks. I'll search for linting, I'll search for spell checking, I'll search for build. I think it's build, right? I think it's build. There we go. Now it showed up. Okay, so we'll make sure that those three have to run. We'll go ahead and create that rule. All right, now we're up and running. So we should see here the code tour watch. We can see it changed file. There were changed files with a possible code tour impact, and that's because it's saying, hey, if I'm updating this blog, there may be some things we want to update about the code tour so that we can make sure that we have some updates there. In this case, in our case, and for most people using this, you may not be worried about that, which is fine. So we see here all our checks are passed. So let's go ahead and merge this pull request. We'll remove the work in progress. It's no longer a work in progress. These are the first edits to our site. We'll merge these changes in, and then we will figure out how to deploy this actually to a .com site. So let's go ahead and merge this in. All right, and then now that we've got those merged in, if we were to go to our site here, we'd see, for example, the CNAME is now technicaljourneys.com. All right, so far so good. So then what we need to do is we need to find a way to get this blog actually deployed into the world, right? And so in order for that to work, we've got to actually tell GitHub Pages, we have to set up GitHub Pages, and we have to deploy this blog. So here we're going to scroll down in our blogs and our repository settings to something called Pages. We can see how GitHub Pages is currently disabled. We haven't set it up at all. So let's go ahead and see what we have to do. We want to deploy from our main branch here. And we say this in the guidance, but we're going to use the /docs folder, which is where the repository, where the blog is located in our repository. We're going to go ahead and save. Now, we should pick up custom domain allows you to serve your site from a domain other than SeanKilleen.com. Now, this is in our CNAME file, so we'll get that as well. So we're going to go ahead and enter technicaljourneys.com. We're going to save that. Your site is ready to be published at technicaljourneys.com. However, it says there's a DNS check in progress, right? We haven't actually told our domain name that it can use GitHub Pages yet. So we have to actually add that. So I'm going to go into my domain registrar, which in my case is Namecheap. I'm already logged in here, so I'll go to my list of domains. You can see my super secret list of domains here. But let's go ahead and find, these really aren't super secret, I promise. We'll go ahead and find technicaljourneys.com. Here we go. Click the Manage button on the right-hand side. And now we can go ahead and add some stuff here. I'm going to go into Advanced DNS. This domain is just parked right now. There's nothing else going on with it. So we can see there's some parking here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the GitHub guide. And I link to this from the blog post as well. Pages, configuring a custom domain for your GitHub Pages site. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing what's called configuring an Apex domain. So configuring an Apex domain means that when we go to technicaljourneys.com, we're not serving our blog from a subdomain. We're serving it from technicaljourneys.com, the root domain. And so because of that, we're going to configure an A name record in our DNS. And so there's not, I mean, we're not going to go into the whole theory behind DNS, nor should you have to know that. So what we see here, though, is this is the important part. To create A records, point your Apex domain to the following IP address for GitHub Pages. Right? So we want to create 4 DNS records there that are A records that have these items. You can see 108, 109, 110, and 111. So I'm going to go ahead and pop over to my records here. I'm going to delete these. And I'm going to add some new records. I'm going to add here an A record. The host here is going to be @ which is the same thing as saying the root domain. And the IP address, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it there. Automatic. We're going to do this for additional records. This was incremented 109, 110, and 111. Okay, and so we should have our records there, and we're going to go ahead, and the last thing we're going to do is I think we're going to create a www subdomain as well. I'm just going to scroll down here. Okay, and we'll create. Okay, so here, in order to create a www as well, so in case someone goes to www.technicaljourneys.com, we want them to go to the site too. We're going to create a CNAME for the www subdomain that points to our user.github.io. So in this case, we're going to say, all right, I've created these A records. I'm going to create a CNAME record. The host is going to be www, and the target, they said, is your username.github.io. So in this case, seankilleen.github.io. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. All right, we can see Namecheap tells us those changes are saved. Let's go back to the GitHub Pages screen. We can see here it says, hey, technicaljourneys.com and its alternate are improperly configured. So now one thing to know about DNS changes, they take a while to propagate. So we told Namecheap to do those automatically, and they'll typically propagate pretty fast. But you may have to perform this check 3 or 4 times, or you may have to wait a couple of hours, or even up to 24 hours for this change to take effect. So just be aware of that. So we're going to go ahead and check again. Looks like it's refreshing the page here. And we can see, okay, your site is published to technicaljourneys.com. The DNS check is in progress. Let's see if it's actually showing up. Hey, technicaljourneys.com, there it is. So it's actually working. It's actually pointing to the right spot. It's still doing some DNS checks on its end, and it looks like, hey, we've succeeded. So nice, that propagated pretty quickly. The last thing we want to do is click enforce HTTPS. Right? We make the web a little more secure, and we'll go ahead and refresh that page, because I think now that this is look at this. GitHub is actually in the process of provisioning a certificate for us. What that means is that this certificate, which may take up to 15 minutes, and that's good to know, what we have here is after that's done, we'll be able to click this button to enforce HTTPS, and we definitely should, and that's going to just help keep the web a little more secure, and we'll make sure that our site is always served with a certificate from an HTTPS domain. All right, so we'll be able to do that. Looks like the certificate has been activated. Please allow for up to 30 minutes to 1 hour for it to be globally available. Yeah, that's pretty cool, I've got to say. I love those status checks. I love that we're getting that kind of feedback when setting it up. And now I can click. Oh, I can't yet. I guess it's not yet ready, and that's okay. So we'll come back to that. But at this point, we've got a website. We've got it published. It's running at our domain name. We've got it configured. We can see my author information here. We can see my location. We can do that. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so let's make another change and see that go live. I see up here we've got this Nav Link. That link points, we've got some things here, some links to different sections of the site, and we've got Excella Labs here as a link. Let's say I want to change that link to something that, like, you know, Sean's site or something like that. I'll show you where that's located, and we'll go through making that change. And then maybe let's set up Netlify preview as well to see what we're doing, to see this work. So let's go ahead, and first we'll make our change here. We're going to come back to GitHub Codespaces. I'm going to switch back to the main branch and pull my changes. I can see here I can pull 11 changes that I made. So now I'm back on my main branch. All right, and now I'd like to create another new branch, right? We had our first edits branch, but we're done with that branch. And now let's just say we'll call this branch Update Nav Link. That's what we want to do in this case. So Nav Links are hosted in this data folder here. Then this is the minimal mistakes theme goes through this. So there's a thing called navigation. We have 3 links. You may notice this looks familiar. There's the Excel Labs link, and there it's at excellabs.com. So let's say instead we wanted to call it Sean's site, and we'll say, okay, should go to seancolleen.com. Okay, so we've saved that. We've saved that page there. Or we say update Nav Link. All right, so we've made our change. Now we're going to go ahead and publish our branch to the origin. Okay. All right, so now that that branch is published, let's go ahead and go to Sean Colleen Technical Journeys. Okay, let's go ahead and compare that. We want to do a pull request here to update our nav link. All right, so well, we don't need to put work in progress because it's the one change we want to make. All right, so we're going to create this. But you know, one of the things I would really hope to have here is some Netlify previews or a preview of what my changes are going to be. And for this, we can use a tool called Netlify. Now, Netlify is a static hosting provider that lovingly allows us to use it for free when we have a public repository. So big props to the folks at Netlify for enabling this. So let's go ahead and look at how to set up Netlify for some previews for our blog. So to do that, I'm going to go to netlify.com. I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to use my GitHub to log in. Now, obviously, you'd sign up if you haven't done it before. I've got to enter a valid auth code, which at this point will do. Great. All right, so I can see, you know, I've got the Sean Colleen team here. What I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a new site. So we can say we can import an existing project or start from a template. So at this point, we're going to import an existing project, right, from my GitHub repository. And I'm going to search for technical journeys. Do a little thinking there. There we go. We see my repository. All right. And this is in the other blog post, by the way. We'll walk us through this. So the branch to deploy, we're going to do main. And the basic build settings here are that the base directory is docs. The build command is going to be bundle exec Jekyll build. Should spell it correctly. The publish directory is going to be docs/_site. And this is because this is where the default output of Jekyll builds go. Do we need any advanced build settings? No, we don't need anything in this case. So this should be, I think, all that we need. And I'm actually going to go ahead and check one last time. I'm going to go to our demo site and make sure I'm entering this correctly. Bundle exec Jekyll build. Oh, and for our, that's right, for our Netlify preview, we do want to publish the future posts. So we'll go ahead and say future. Then we'll go ahead and click deploy site. And with this, we'll see this going on. Okay. It's starting things up. It's going to build things. And Netlify is incredibly fast. Again, great product. I wonder if they actually... Netlify adds itself here as well. Just for the sake of this, I'm actually going to go ahead and close this pull request, and I'm going to open another one. Because at this point, I believe we have the ability to get those deployments here. Okay. So I'll create a pull request again. Choose different branches or folks above. Oh, I think it's because I actually already had that pull request with those changes. Let me go and reopen that. I'm going to restore that branch, and I'm going to reopen the pull request. We'll see if Netlify finds its way into this, and that's fine if it doesn't. But in general, once the site has been deployed, oh, we can see it's Netlify is successfully deployed. Let's take a look at it. Okay, now this is at a Netlify URL, which again, we're not going to necessarily use this time, but we're going to say thank you, Netlify, for your amazing features, and we're going to see if they're adding their checks here. Yeah, that's a little bit strange. Now, in this case, we're not going to worry about the Netlify preview. Let's go ahead. I think I am going to close this once more. And there's an action that's going to run that's going to delete this branch just to help keep things tidy. All right, close this. And then we see that something deleted that branch. I'm going to go ahead and restore the branch and then see if I can create that pull request once more. New pull request. Update nav link here. All right, so I can, there's an old pull request there. I'll create this new one here just to see if it works. Okay. Now we can see Netlify, right, because we already had the pull request open before. Now we get all this great stuff. Netlify has a bot that says, here's a deploy preview. You can see the latest log. It's going to go ahead and complete, and now we can see exactly what's going to happen at the Netlify site. But we can see here, let's just, we'll get an example of what it's going to look like. Okay. We'll let it complete. It looks like it did complete here. We've got the deploy preview is ready. Let's go ahead and click details. And we can see here, we do see, oh, it looks like it's gonna update correctly. We've got Sean's site there. And if I click on it, it does go to SeanColleen.com. Great. So I think at this point we say, okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna go back to find the pull request here. And it looks like it's all good. I can go ahead and merge that in. The preview looked good. All my checks are passing. We've merged that. And then within a few moments, that's going to be live on technicaljourneys.com. So we can probably go ahead and do that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and say this has been a pretty long walkthrough. I hadn't intended for it to be this long initially. I thought we'd do a couple different videos. But I'm glad we were able to get so much accomplished today. And so if you've got questions, feel free to add an issue in the repository. Feel free to walk through that or walk through the blog post and let us know if there's anything we can update there. But I hope this is going to give you a good starter to doing things like publishing your own blog posts or creating your own site. Because again, your voice is valuable and we do want to hear more of it. So with that, I will say I'm going to sign off for now. But thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and come along the journey with me. And I hope that you find this beneficial in the future. So certainly we'll do some follow-up videos as folks have questions, and we'll go from there. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend or enjoy the rest of your day if you're watching this at a later time. And I hope you have a wonderful adventure creating your new site. All right, thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.